Here we go.
From the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to what is sure to be an electric edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. I, of course, am the real Brad Bell, and joining me today, as always, is
Jerry Reed, also known as Barbecue 17.
We also have
Andrew Stokes, a.k.a. Andrew Stokes.
A.k.a. Bonesaw.
Sometimes.
And here for the first time on the Confirmed Epic Podcast. You may have known him from a few comments he left on the website or his wrestling work, but here to finally debate with us live in person is Evan Truelove, also known as
Evan.
Evan. All right, Evan, we are glad to have you on the show, especially for this special kickoff to the summer blockbuster season 2014 edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast.
And roll the sound effect. Kickoff sound effect. Go.
And there it is. That's our kickoff sound effect.
That was great.
Also, today is what, Jerry?
It's May the 4th, so may the 4th be with you.
Yeah, happy Star Wars Day, everybody, from the Confirmed Epic Podcast team.
To you and your family.
So let's go
May
ahead.
the Force be with you all.
And get this started.
I just want to say it's interesting that Masters of the Universe Day and May the 4th are like within just a couple days of each other.
And Spider-Man released.
You know what's even more
That means
interesting
nothing.
is that nobody cares about Masters of the Universe Day and everybody cares about Star Wars Day.
A lot of people.
Our website celebrated.
Yeah, a lot of people care about May the 4th. I mean, we've seen a lot of special things. You said Sports Center?
Yeah, Sports Center was just taken over by Star
Was
Wars.
Chewbacca on there?
He was.
Yeah, he's always on everything.
R2-D2.
But, I just want to say that last year for Masters of the Universe Day, there were 7 websites that celebrated. This year, there were closer to about 20.
Wow.
Number of different Twitter accounts. The Fwoosh, probably one of the largest action figure sites out there, actually participated as well. We're a part of the group, though, known as the Magnificent Seven for starting this last year. So
Cool.
really excited.
I'm picturing Sports Center's not top 10, showing the Stormtrooper hitting his head coming into the control room.
A couple weeks ago, they had Yoda making Final Four predictions during
Really?
March Madness.
Nice.
Yes. So, Star Wars is obviously owned by Disney now. Disney owns ESPN, ABC, all that.
Everything
so
that
it makes
Walmart and
sense.
Google doesn't argue.
Here's the top 10 worst Hayden Christensen lines from 5 minutes of episode 10. No, go.
So let's go ahead and get started. Andrew
All right.
Stokes, what have you been checking out this week?
Well, I asked Brad the other day if I should start watching True Detective or House of Cards. I took his thoughts into consideration and started watching Young Justice instead.
For the record, I recommended House of Cards.
I really wanted to watch one, but I watched when I realized Young Justice was on Netflix, I watched a couple episodes, and by the time I was ready to watch something, I'm in like last week of school. I only had like bits and pieces of time. I didn't have time for like a full, 40 some odd minute, hour long episode. So I just started watching, and it got to a point where I was just like, I remembered how good this show was. And started watching it all.
When you're going to watch a show, obviously, and not necessarily binge watching, but you're like, this is the show I'm watching right now. Do you have to pick one and just stick with that? Or can you... Because I can mix and match like a 30-minute cartoon and an hour drama.
Yeah, I can do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can easily do that.
I can mix in something light. I'm trying to catch up on Parks and Rec as well. So I've been mixing that in as well. I just haven't had, like I said, the time to really sit down and enjoy House of Cards like I want to. So probably next week is probably start that.
Forget about Young Justice. It's an injustice you're not watching House of Cards.
Oh, it's an injustice that Young Justice ended after only 2 seasons.
Yeah. Have you seen Young Justice?
I've seen parts of it.
I
It's really
watched
good.
it when it
Well,
first...
tell them what it is for people who don't know.
It's a
Young
movie.
Justice.
It's a TV show. It's a cartoon.
Yes.
About...
Pretty much
young people serving justice. It's about the sidekicks of the DC universe.
kind of like the Teen Titans, but a little bit more
mature.
A little bit more mature.
It's surprisingly mature sometimes.
More different sidekicks, though. It's not as limited to the Teen Titans.
There's an episode I watched the other day. The kid didn't die, but the kid definitely got blown up.
Yeah.
And you see him, like, his body flying through the air. There was a reference. One of the characters, the female archer, I think she lost her bow or something. And she was like, feel naked, and not the fun kind of naked. I'm just like...
I'm wondering.
odd.
Sometimes they have different versions that go on Netflix as opposed to what originally aired. For example, with some of the Clone Wars stuff, Darth Maul was decapitating people on the Netflix version of it.
Interesting.
But on the actual version that aired on Cartoon Network, they didn't show anything.
I actually wasn't aware of that.
Me either to this week, earlier this week.
I think with Young Justice, it's just a really weird, another example of so many of the DC shows, and people would argue other shows too. Cartoon Network, because that's where it aired, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Really, I mean, did not do a great job of, I don't know if it was a great job of promoting this show or DC really.
When I first started watching it, I felt like it was good and bad. It could be really good and it could be really bad at times. And I felt like a lot of the earlier episodes were going to formulaic.
I have an answer.
After watching, after binge watching it and watching it back to back to back to back, instead of having to wait a week in between each episode, it flowed a lot better. And it's such a good show. It's I don't know, things carry on from episode to episode, and like just little things. Like one character breaks their arm, and their arm's broken for a few episodes.
I saw what Brad wrote, and I think I know what he's going to say, but go for it.
I was listening to an episode of the podcast Fat Man on Batman that Kevin Smith does, and he had Paul Dini on, and he was one of the lead guys over DC stuff at Cartoon Network. And he was working on Young Justice among some other shows, and I believe he had done a bit of consulting work on Beware the Batman.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, the people come in from Cartoon Network and they say, we want something younger. Young Justice is too mature, it's too dark, it's too serious. They said to him, we would rather have an episode of the Teen Titans where they get in a fight over who ordered the most pizza as opposed to like a legit comic book store. And that's when Paul Dini left Cartoon Network.
I think there was another, and I hope I'm attributing this correctly to Paul Dini, but I think it was also somebody was talking about they really want shows that they say appeal to young boys that are buying toys. Because there was one show, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It may have been.
It appealed to females. I can't remember.
To females,
yes,
and they said that's not what they wanted. They're like, wait, this show's appealing to boys, appealing to girls, and they're like, girls don't buy action figures. You know, we want you got to narrow the focus.
Paul Dini was a showrunner on that show. I just can't remember what it was. That may have been. I think it was a live action show. Was it? Or was it a cartoon?
Remember, so
because they do show live action on Cartoon
Network has a really tough time of, like, they have two really specific demographics, it seems. It either has to be, like, that stuff that's really geared towards, like, preteen boys, or it's stuff that's really geared to, like, 20 to 30-something, you know, guys. And anything that sort of seems like it's going to hit the in-between, they usually get rid of really quickly. But then some of, like, the really bizarre stuff, like on Adult Swim, can hang around for years.
So if you want to check out Young Justice, it's available to stream on Netflix.
The first season is, and it's so good, I'm probably going to wind up buying the second season. I don't know if they plan on releasing it at some point on Netflix, but I know I'm like 2 episodes left in the season, and I know it's going to come to like, there's so much left, I know it's going to come to a point where I'm just going to have to watch the second season.
I reviewed it last year, but the Batman action figure from that line, the 6-inch one, is like one of my favorite Batman figures ever. He comes with the big wall. A lot of my pictures and reviews, I have like this. It looks like a city wall, like a wall with like a grotesque on it and stuff. The figure came with that. It came with like smoke bombs and batarangs and all kinds of crazy stuff.
He's a somewhat big part of the show.
Beautiful toy line.
It's not even that big a
Shame that it died so quick.
So, Barbecue, what have you been checking out?
I have been checking out the Xbox Games with Gold release for the first part of May, which is Dust and Elysian Tale. Really, really fun game. This came out about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago.
It's pretty recent, relatively speaking.
It's an action role-playing game, so it really feels very old school in the way you play. It's a side-scroller. Jumping, combats in real time. It's not turn based. Beautiful graphics, just a lot of fun. It's the story about this looks like a rabbit, but he's wearing like this almost like a Ronin, a Ronin kind of armor, and he wakes up in these woods and this enchanted sword comes and tells him he has a quest because he can't remember anything about his identity. And so he starts traveling through these different villages and towns, and these monsters are taking over, but it's a really fun game. The art is beautiful in this game. I mean, even just downloading it, it's gorgeous.
Even just downloading it.
Yeah, I said even
Watch
just
it.
yeah,
Watch
even
it
So
download
it's direct download straight from Xbox
stripped down.
Live.
Even just
Okay.
downloading it and like watching the art and stuff. Not even concerned about the gameplay.
Yeah.
Just, the art's beautiful, but the gameplay's really fun, very fast. Has some light RPG elements to it, but definitely requires like skill. It's not a turn-based RPG where you can require.
Are you saying turn-based RPGs don't need skill?
I'm thinking that's more thinking than Twitch.
No, I know. It's more
Twitch
strategy.
gaming skill.
Yeah, I
more
feel you.
strategy versus like you're actually having to fight in this game. But I'm really liking it, and I'm just once again loving getting a free Xbox game. About every 2.5 weeks.
Are you going to play the next one this month's going to be Saints Row the Third?
Yeah, I'm interested to download it now.
You can play the entire story co-op,
Okay,
which is pretty cool.
you have it.
Yeah, I have. Dusty and I both got it's not this region though. It's like the Asia Pacific.
Dusty
region.
is a friend of Andrew's. For those of you out there in listener land
also
who
call
have
him
no
Bonesaw.
idea who that is.
Yeah, we call him Big D sometimes.
Big D.
But we played through the second one together. It was a lot of fun. The third one is even goofier. I think I like the second one a little more. But yeah,
Okay.
it's I'm excited to play. We didn't play that much of it.
All right, Evan
Cool
Truelove, what have you been checking out this week?
I have been checking out Fargo on FX.
Now, explain to the listeners, explain to me, because I haven't watched Fargo yet. Is this different from the Coen brothers film? Is it a different story? Is it a retelling of the same story? What is it?
It's completely different than the movie. A lot of the same themes of the movie. For those of you who don't know the movie, 96, I think, was the year it came out.
Sounds right.
Short movie, only about like 80, 90 minutes long, about a guy who tries to commit insurance fraud in a non-spoilerish way, and he gets caught up with the wrong people. Great movie.
Yeah.
I think I like it more than most people do. But the show hits on a lot of the same themes, but it's completely different than the movie.
And it's got Billy Bob Thornton in it,
It has
right?
Billy Bob Thornton, Martin Sheen, Bob Odenkirk from Breaking Bad, not Martin Sheen, Martin Freeman. Martin Freeman.
Yeah.
If they had Martin Sheen, it'd be a lot better. But Martin Freeman, he's a guy who's been he's been around a lot lately on Sherlock, on
Yeah.
The World's End. Sherlock,
Very, very busy.
yeah, Sherlock, which is awesome. He's also Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit.
That's where most people know him from. Now, I heard a friend of mine's watching Fargo at work, and he said, I know, Evan, you hadn't watched have you watched True
Which he
Detective
should be
yet?
working.
I have not.
All right. Well, a friend of mine at work was saying how that it's very similar to like True Detective, and he compared it to. He says it's almost as good as True Detective. It's like just a tiny notch below it, but it's kind of. I mean, I haven't watched the show. It just looks very kind of. I don't know the cinematography is very that kind of like bland, dry, just. Perfect
Bleak.
for like a bleak. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for, Jerry. Perfect shot perfectly for that type of murder show, which is what it revolves around, murders, right? Is that true, or am I off basis?
It
Without
revolves around
spoiling
more. It revolves around more than that,
Yeah.
It's about a guy who just gets mixed up in a bad situation. Very similar to Breaking Bad in that way. Just a good guy who gets caught up in a bad situation. But I don't want to spoil anything. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But
You think it'll make it? You think it'll have longevity on FX, or is this going to kind of be like a
think
one shot, one season?
It's a
and that's
miniseries,
it?
isn't it?
it's definitely a miniseries.
Okay,
They'll probably
okay.
probably do like a True Detective and just redo it next season with completely different cast, completely different characters, and everything.
Interesting.
Completely different story. It is. It's kind of like it's led FX, like this show has like turned FX into maybe the best network on TV right now. It's
Yeah,
just fun.
Justified on there. Love it.
Not a huge fan of Justified, but they do have The Americans, which is probably the most underrated show on TV. Some people watch it, but people watch it to love it, and I love The Americans. Also, Fargo, you got Louis, you got Wilfred. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
The League. We
You
love
got
that.
Louis, which starts back up this Monday, or tomorrow actually. Can't wait. A friend told me that he thinks FX was better than AMC, and I laughed at him when he first said it. But I look now like it is a better network than AMC. I think it's second to probably only HBO right now in terms of
Quality
in terms of
drama.
quality.
Good variety, it sounds like.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, the thing that Evan was saying about FX, they're hitting on not just the heavy-handed dramas, but those comedies,
Yeah.
too.
I mean, they have the best comedies on TV. You know,
and
Louis Wilfred, it's always saying
their variety's probably better than HBO. I mean, HBO's, they have Game of Thrones, they have True Detective, but like as far as comedies, was it Veep and Silicon Valley?
Yeah, Veep and Silicon Valley.
Good, new John Oliver show.
Yeah, the John Oliver show.
This week.
It's a good show.
Yes.
I mean, it's he needed something to do similar to the Daily Show.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Louis, which I think is like probably the best comedy on TV, comes back this week. It's better than anything on any comedy on any other network.
We're gonna watch that. I haven't checked it out yet, but
it's been gone for 2 years.
It's Louis C.K., right? Ain't that the guy's name? Louis. It's turned into like a household name. Like I've never listened to any stand up of his. I've seen the show, but I know who he is because of Louis. And everybody who has heard anything he's done says, like Andrew said and Evan saying, absolutely hilarious.
I feel like I'm ahead on the curve on Louis because I was like preaching this guy's praises like 3, 4, 5 years ago. Like, this guy's hilarious. Louis is such an excellent show.
Yeah.
And now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be cool to hate Louis now. It's going to be the next cool thing.
Has anyone started watching Turn? The AMC show Turn?
I have all 4 episodes saved on my DVR and yet to watch a single
It
one.
reminds me too much of work history.
I wanted to watch it. I just haven't got around to seeing it.
I've never I have them like all on my DVR.
It looks interesting, but okay. I was just wondering.
All right, so on to what I've been checking out. I finally got around to. They've been on my DVR for months, so I'm months and months behind on this show, but I absolutely love it. It's on Fox. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, starring Andy Samberg in the lead role.
Talk about the best comedy on TV.
Oh.
Yeah, it is this guy Andrew.
Best comedy on broadcast TV.
It's Andrew Bauer, right? He's the police. Andre Bauer, who plays the openly gay police chief. Which the guy in this role is absolutely hilarious because he's so stoic,
deadpan, and he's just
yes. Oh my God, he's. They talk about
this is my happy face.
Exactly. They talk about having trouble reading this guy, and all of a sudden it could be the best day of his life or the worst day of his life, and same expression throughout. I love it. The chemistry's there. One thing about this show is I think it is trying to be just a flat-out, straightforward, laugh-out-loud comedy, right? It's not trying to be like The Office where it's a comedy, but it has these
You have many episodes to go, my friend.
Really? Am I wrong? I
feel it's more flat-out comedy than The Office, but once you start getting near the end of the season, especially the season finale, there's a little more to it than that.
Okay.
I'm really interested to see where the second season's going to go based on the season finale.
The vibe it gave me when I first watched like 2 or 3 episodes was that of the 21 Jump Street movie a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's not that raunchy because, like Evan said, it's on network TV and there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
But they're very. I almost think that makes you have to make your writing a little bit clever when you can't, curse and make too many sexual references, and it's just stupid funny, man. And it's good. I love that.
I wasn't sure what to expect when it first started coming out, but I forget why I just started watching. Just something new to watch. I love Andy Samberg, but it was surprisingly funny.
I remember Andy Samberg on SNL, and Andy Samberg was on there at the same time as Bill Hader, and I didn't like Andy Samberg. Everybody loved him. He did those parody songs and all that. And I always thought Bill Hader was the more talented comedian, but now I disagree with that as I watch Bill Hader do AT&T commercials and I watch Andy Samberg lead a show on Fox, a comedy. He's such a good physical comedian, man. Like, he's very good with his physical comedy. So check it out. If you're behind, it's worth catching up on Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Fox. So with that, let's go ahead and move into news, guys. And since it is May the 4th be with you, it's never a better day to talk about this epic Star Wars news that's broke.
Star Wars casting.
That's right. After waiting and being teased from Disney and Lucasfilm for months and months, we finally have the release cast of the new Star Wars Episode 7 coming out in December 2015. All right, and that cast is going to include, for those of you who are wondering, all the original 3, right? Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Peter Mayhew is Mayhew. Am I saying it right? Chewbacca.
Also Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Which is amazing to me that Kenny Baker's still in that tin can with all the technology.
We don't know that he'll
now.
actually be in there. He might have another role.
He lives in there.
But
he has never left.
It's his apartment now.
Evan, let's talk about some of these new cast members. I think probably anybody here, these new cast members better than all of us. Have you seen Girls?
I have seen the first 2 seasons of Girls. The first season was good. The second season not so much. But Adam Driver is by far the best part of that entire show.
So what I'm gonna ask, how is this guy?
He's in that. He's in this movie called Francis Ha, which I saw recently. he just has this way about him. You just have to see it to know what he is. But he has this very distinct style. He
Do you see him, like, what do you see him
I see him
as
as
in
a
Star
villain.
Wars?
I
As
see
a
him as a
villain?
villain.
Okay.
yeah.
As he, looking at the guy, I thought he kind of reminded me of Benedict Cumberbatch. Am I far off in that? Cumberbatch, whatever. Cumberbatch, right?
Which is like the most British name ever.
Yeah.
Benedict.
I mean, am I close? Are they kind of similar or very different? Or
Oh, they're very different. Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, is a better actor. I'll watch anything that guy's in. But
that's who everybody wanted to be, a Sith Lord in
Yeah.
the Star
it'd be
Wars
perfect.
movie, and it didn't happen. But let's talk about some of these other ones. All right, we have Oscar Isaac, who was in Inside Llewyn Davis, which I still hadn't seen. Have you seen that yet, Evan?
I have seen Inside Llewyn Davis.
What do you think about Oscar Isaac?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what kind of role he would be. He's a good actor. He did a good job in that role. Some people think he may be this kind of general type.
Mm-hmm. Like somebody in the Rebellion.
Yeah.
Or, well, it wouldn't be the Rebellion anymore, but it would be the Republic, the New Republic.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
He's our new Akbar.
I think we can all agree, though, here
that's a big.
we're
big
going to keep
words if he's
going
the new
through the
Akbar.
cast, but man, there's not one person looking through this cast list I'm like, what the heck is this guy or girl doing in here? You
It's
know?
a very interesting because it doesn't have as many like big names as as you might think of. But then again, when you already have Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, that's kind of the draw right there.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of building up some new ones as well. I thought the Max von Sydow was an interesting, but that really follows some Star Wars casting well because both trilogies in the Star Wars films have taken older actors who were sort of well known for these different performances. Of course, he was Ming the Merciless in the Flash Gordon film. We know, George Lucas was really inspired by the old serials and like Flash Gordon and stuff. Now he was in the version that had the soundtrack by Queen.
When I see
in the
this
80s.
casting, I think this is the Dooku Obi-Wan type character for this trilogy,
well, like
right?
Peter Cushing, as Grand Moff Tarkin in the original films. Once again, somebody who'd been in lots of older horror films and sci-fi genre films. Peter Cushing played the Doctor in some Doctor Who movies and stuff. So with the new series, you had Christopher Lee. Here you've got Max von Sydow.
And one, I know, Evan, this is one I am familiar with, John Boyega, who's going to be on the upcoming season of 24, this new one coming out, and he was in Attack of the Block, and talented actor, and it's good to see a minority character in the principal cast here, because a lot of people have complained about Star Wars not having enough diversity in their cast with as far as having minority characters in the lead or having female characters in the lead. So, Boyega, have you seen him anything else that I haven't?
Not just Attack the Block.
He hadn't been in much. He's 22 years old, young actor. If you hadn't seen Attack of the Block, watch that movie. I really enjoyed that film. Let's see, Andy Serkis. All right, what?
That's the one I was most happy about, mostly because I have no idea who any of these other people are. So I just haven't seen any of these things that they've been involved in. So of the new cast, obviously,
It's going to be really interesting to see how they utilize Andy Serkis.
He's great. Yeah, I can't wait to see. He's just phenomenal.
They're bringing him in to do mocap work on the Hulk too. I saw that.
Oh, really?
With Mark Ruffalo to
That's
kind of
cool.
make it more.
Man, the guy.
They're making a Hulk 2?
No, to be in the
Hulk.
Hulk 2
Oh.
TOO with Avengers 2.
Okay, I was like, wait, what?
One more on this cast list. Well, two more we got to talk about. Ron Weasley. Not Ron
Bill
Weasley.
Weasley.
Bill
Bill
Weasley.
Weasley.
Whatever, the Weasley twins. I'm not a Harry Potter fanatic, but how do you pronounce his name?
Bill was not one of the twins.
Bill was the one
Bill's
who
the
married.
older
Fred
brother.
George are the twins. Fred
He was
George,
only
right?
very briefly in the movie.
Yeah, he didn't have a huge.
Now, which one did he play? Dom Hall Gleason here. He played Bill Weasley.
Yeah, so
played
he was
Bill.
like the older brother who worked for the Ministry of Magic.
Yeah.
He married what's her name from who was in The Goblet of Fire? Who was one of the
Flo Delacour.
yes.
Oh,
that's it.
yeah.
Well, he's in this too. All right, one of the Weasley people. And then we have, for a younger female, her name is Daisy Ridley. She is the most unknown of not a greatly known group, I would say. Young British actress, And many people, I think she's like 11, 12 years old.
Okay.
They see her as, they think maybe she'll be like Anakin of the first trilogy and Luke of the second trilogy, that she's going to be the primary character of this trilogy, which
Find
would
out
be
C-3PO is her father.
which would be very interesting. Which would kind of
That would be interesting.
we had in the prequels, he wanted an unknown when he picked what's the guy that
Jake
played
Lloyd.
Jake Lloyd. Yes, I mean he had been in Jingle All the Way, but
Yeah.
Which made him a household name.
he wasn't like
No.
Dakota Fanning or something like that well known as an actress.
Ooh, they should put Dakota Fanning here.
Let's
Dakota Fanning.
talk about
Sorry,
Random.
their strategy here. All right,
Okay.
they're casting talented actors. They brought back the original cast.
Good strategy on both fronts.
Like I mentioned to Jerry, they're not bringing in like Robert Downey Jr. or Leonardo DiCaprio or somebody who is like the A-list of the A-list, right?
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, none of those people, right? So is this, to me, with Star Wars, this is good because I see them more as the characters they will be playing, as opposed to, Leonardo DiCaprio was in Inception, he was in Aviator, he was in, you know what I'm saying? That may be a funny thing. I'm not usually like that with movies, but
it's a good way to really try to build a cast.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, not just assemble, taking like, okay, really popular actor, really popular, really well-known actress, to get a group, and I mean, just by being in a Star Wars movie, it's going to give them quite a boost. I mean, most of the people from the Star Wars films have,
they haven't been that successful.
I'm gonna recant that. You always have somebody who becomes like
like Harrison Ford.
Natalie Portman was known before Episode 1, but things really took off for her. I mean, she was in some movies. Don't get me wrong. We knew she was a good actress. Where Hayden Christensen sort of disappeared.
He was in Jumper, guys. I don't know if y'all saw
He was in
that,
Jumper.
but
He was in what? House of
He was
Glass?
in a good movie with T.I. What was it? I know that sounds a good movie.
Taker.
Did you watch
I've
Takers?
seen Takers, unfortunately.
Well, I was thinking Takers was going to be terrible. It was like Paul Walker, T.I., like Hayden Christensen. Actually, decent film.
I mean, I like Jumper for what it was. I mean, it's not like...
It wasn't a
I haven't
giant
seen
piece
it.
of
You haven't
garbage.
seen
It
Jumper?
was
Yeah,
just
I thought it was
a little
entertaining.
Same with the
garbage.
original film. That I mean, all of the three casts. I mean, they've been successful, but in different kind of ways. Mostly just because they were in a Star Wars movie. But Mark Hamill's had the pretty good
voice acting
career. Carrie Fisher actually, I mean, had a really big career. Has a really big career. Script doctoring is like a huge thing she does.
Being
writing.
a spokeswoman for Jenny Craig, yeah.
So, but Harrison Ford was like, definitely the acting standout there.
Definitely.
So,
I want to ask you guys this, especially since we've got Evan here. And I was thinking about this as the Star Wars cast was announced as we were going to see a new Spider-Man movie. Out of all the stuff that we know is coming out in the near future, I think I've asked Jared this question before on the podcast, but out of our Batman versus Superman, or out of the Sinister Six, Amazing Spider-Man 3, whatever they're going to call it, out of the Avengers 2, out of all these big tentpole franchise type films that we got to look forward to as geeks over the next couple of years, does this take the cake? Is this at the top, the Star Wars Episode 7?
from the minute they announced it, for me.
For you? What about for you, Andrew? I'm just curious.
It's either that or Avengers 2. But, I mean, it's up there. Because J.J. Abrams is attached to it as well. And now it's just, I don't know. I think they're going to do I don't think they're going to do it justice. You know what I mean? And I'm excited. It's kind of like the first Avengers, where I was more just curious to see what this is going to be. And that's kind of how I am with Episode 7 right now. You know what I mean? I'm very curious as to what we're going to get and what the story is going to be and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's up there with Avengers 2, because I'm still curious about Avengers 2 now, what that's going to be.
What about you, Evan? Is this the top of your geek list here?
Of everything you've listed, it more than likely is. Batman Superman, I'm just very curious to see what it is. I can see a trailer and it just turns me off right away.
Yeah.
As soon as I see any footage from it. It's already heading in the wrong direction right now anyway.
With Ben Affleck?
And the Cyborg and Gal Gadot as Wonder
sounds
Woman and
more
every
like-
single other DC.
Yeah, they're making Justice League.
It's not. Yeah, won't
You
they
gotta
just
try.
rename it Justice League
I
instead
know.
of Batman?
I'm
Well, they
curious-
announced
I'm
Justice League
curious
now,
for
right?
that. The Avengers, we know what the Avengers is going to be. We know what Spider-Man's going to probably be. Star Wars and Batman, Superman, we don't know what it's going to be really. It's more so a curiosity with Batman, Superman than anything else.
I
honestly
agree.
curious about that.
It's hard for me to.
The only time I would be curious about is that Snyder movie.
Yeah. It's hard for me to separate. Star Wars is kind of its own thing within geek culture, right?
A new Star Wars film, and especially the beginning of a new trilogy, is a big deal.
And it's almost as if Star Wars is going to be... Well, mine's Sinister Six, first of all. I'm just kidding. All right. But it's almost like Star Wars is going to be almost a breath of fresh air in between these superhero movies. It's a huge tentpole fanboy property. I almost said tentpole. Fanboy property to get excited about that's not a superhero movie. And when was the last movie like that we had?
Godzilla.
I have a question.
It's true.
I think they're getting kind of late to the game with Star Wars, and it's a movie that's going to have like just an insane amount of post production. Like I'm not 100% sure they're going to make it by December 2015
of next year.
Yeah, that's not that long. That's basically a year and a half.
I think they've probably been doing all the pre-production stuff. They've already started filming, to my understanding.
They did principal photography in April, but that's just getting shots and things. But as far as getting like actors there, they're starting now. Like they're starting in May of this year, and they're over in Morocco right now filming.
I mean, if they finish it by the end of this, by December, I mean, that's a year almost of post-production. So
they seem hell-bent on meeting that deadline for whatever reason.
I honestly, I still wonder. I question the reason for not doing a May release. I mean, I understand that, if they would have done May of next year, one, it wouldn't have happened. Two, they would have been competing with the Avengers, which is Disney's own property. But I'm really thinking, why not do this May 2016? Because Star Wars is a film that's going to have some longevity to it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it could own a summer, which is a big thing.
What's going to compete with Star Wars Episode 7 in January through February? It's going to go...
That's the dumping ground.
Releasing in December, it's going to have exclusive longevity.
Here's the other thing, though, too, that some people have brought up, and I think it's a wise point. Star Wars... Let's face it, it's a merchandising juggernaut.
Oh, yeah.
It's a merchandising juggernaut.
That stuff.
Yeah. How is this going to, if the movie comes out right before Christmas...
Merchandise is coming out before the movie comes out.
Right, but Halloween.
Kids are not necessarily going to have time to ask for this stuff until they've seen the movie. The young, the next generation of kids, where in the summer they'd be building up to the DVD release by that point, and your merchandising would do a lot better. It's interesting to me that Star Wars has always kind of had this May release too. I mean, it's kind of been
tradition,
kind of like Bond
franchise.
in November. It's weird to me why they would choose to break that.
Evan and I have been wanting a big film like this to come out. We have good movies at Christmas and things like that, and some very good Oscar stuff around that time. But as far as like a big tentpole, maybe superhero franchise film to come out in December, I believe Star Trek 2 was supposed to, Green Lantern, which ended up being a piece of crap. Star Trek 1 was. Yeah. But every time they schedule one for this window, it gets
Man of
pushed back.
Steel was like originally supposed to come out in December.
It never happens.
You have weather problems. You have people spending time with friends and family. You have people spending time traveling. In the summer, people go on vacation, but people are much more likely to go to the theaters in the summer, which seems strange because you would think in the winter, but the winter just has this association with
November
dumping
and
grounds.
Not November,
not December. Yeah,
November.
It's been bigger. What Avatar?
Yeah, November and December is like the second hottest time of the year for films. I mean,
I accept your apology, everyone.
I would love for them to push it back to May 2016, just because you have this big mess already in May 2016, like the first weekend of May with Captain America 3 and Batman Superman both on the same weekend. If there's Star Wars in there, everybody's going to back down from Star Wars.
It's going to be fun.
It's just curious to watch this whole mess. Just
speaking of,
I wish they wouldn't have announced. I wish they wouldn't have announced it yet, and people would just be guessing. It's kind of like when Grand Theft Auto 5 was coming out or whatever, and the video game industry, just seeing all these dates keep changing because people weren't sure when GTA 5 was going to come out.
There were a lot of movies that just backed off the weekend that Star Wars already has now.
When do we see the first teaser trailer, you guys think?
Tomorrow.
By the end of the year, probably.
By the end of this year.
What comes out?
Trying to think, what's the big tentpole release?
Disney has that Big Hero 6
You think
movie.
with The Hobbit?
It's Warner Brothers, though.
Yeah,
that's true.
Big Hero 6 is a Disney movie that comes out this year. A lot of people are excited about it.
Yeah.
It could be something like with that.
Yeah, and that'd put butts in the seats to see that movie, just to see the trailer for Star Wars. A lot of people went. What was the movie, Jerry, that you went that it was attached to the episode 1 trailer? It was Brad Pitt was in the movie.
Joe Black.
Yeah, that
Meet
was
Joe Black.
Meet Joe Black, and then Disney's Monsters Incorporated had the Fox's Episode 2 trailer in front of it.
Really?
Yeah. And then Disney's Incredibles had the Revenge of the Sith trailer.
All right, from a release mess to a canonicity mess. Let's talk about maybe not what might not be a mess any longer. Jerry, you wrote a great article, kind of put everything into words, organized it for the epicreview.com, talking about how Disney is handling the expanded universe and everything like that. Can you lay some of it out for us?
Absolutely. So, in Star Wars, there's always been the idea of an expanded universe. These are books, stories, video games, sometimes TV shows that take place basically outside of the movies. They take place at other times, before and after. The book Shadows of the Empire in 1996 that actually took place in between.
Which was a film release without
95, sorry,
right?
Shadows. Yeah, it was called a film release with everything but the film. It had a soundtrack, video games, comic books.
Toys.
Yeah, toys.
I still have like the dash render Outrider.
Yeah, the little Outrider.
I still have it.
The swoop bike and all of those
Let's
things.
edit that off right there. Don't bang that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So, the expanded universe is huge. I mean, it has a life of its own. I mean, it really has grown and grown and grown to hundreds of novels.
People have read all of these.
Yeah, dozens of video games. And the expanded universe dates back to 1977-78 with the release of, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Yeah, the book Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster, who ghost wrote the original Star Wars movie adaptation from the script. So the issue was, well, how is the expanded universe going to be affected, or how is it going to affect the movies going forward? Because the expanded universe, there are plenty of books, dozens and dozens and dozens of books that take place after Return of the Jedi,
like the Thrawn trilogy.
Exactly, the Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, all of those books, the new Jedi Knights, everything. So what has happened is that Lucasfilm has announced that basically everything moving forward is going to be part of the Star Wars universe. It's really going to have the same level of canon. Every movie, book, comic book, video game, TV
we'll
show.
See how long
that is crazy to me. Whereas we had before levels of canon, right,
We
Jared?
had levels of canon. Back prior to this announcement, you had the films, which were often called G-level canon, George Lucas canon. So you had the 6 films.
OG canon.
And then you had the T canon, which was like television shows. The Clone Wars was a level of canon. Then you had your books and your video games were a separate level of canon. At this point, everything's going to be on the same level. They've got a whole team dedicated to this.
And now it has been confirmed that Clone Wars and Rebels are on the same as the films, right?
Clone Wars has now been determined. Yeah, going forward, absolutely Rebels is part of the canon. But it's actually been determined that Clone Wars is now on the same level of canonicity. I think the words that were used were basically that the 6 films and Clone Wars are like the stones that everything else is built on.
Yeah, they're like
so
the pillars
nothing can contradict those.
Stone pillars.
So here's where things get a little murky. They're still going to be releasing the Expanded Universe books. People love them. People read them.
Talking about past ones.
Yeah, past books are still going to be released. They're going to be called Star Wars Legends. They're going to have like a little a banner across them. Yeah, say Star Wars Legends. And they've said that things from the Expanded Universe, the previous, can still come into play in the new Star Wars universe. Say, for instance, a story plot element or a character.
Such as a moon killing Chewbacca.
An alien race or something. I think the moon killing Chewbacca is going to be edited out. But some of those things can still come into play, and that's okay.
A moon killed Chewbacca?
A giant moon fell on Chewbacca in the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
Also, Ari Salvatore wrote that.
Also, Lando Calrissian taught Luke Skywalker how to make hot chocolate in the drink.
What I love about this, I'm going to tell you what I love and what I hate about this.
Okay,
right?
What do you love about it?
What I love about it is Andrew's like, right, how long will it last? But what I love is everything going forward. We know that every kind of expanded universe book, every cartoon, whatever, is the same level canon. It's interwoven, connected story. All right, we know that from the horse's mouth, from Disney, from Lucasfilm, so we don't have to question that from now on. All right, but my problem is I understand future stuff like the Thrawn trilogy and everything set after Return of the Jedi. I understand why that wouldn't be canon, right? Because they're making movies within the same time period. But what about, I've recently been reading that Darth Bane trilogy, which is all set in the Old Republic. What about stuff prior to that? You know, it's like Jerry and I had this conversation off the podcast. Are they going to go back and write a new Darth Bane trilogy in canon? Probably not. So where do you put that? Is it the Legends banner? What do you think,
that's
Jerry?
That's kind of my question at this point, too. Like, let's just take Shadows of the Empire, for instance. Shadows of the Empire was written by Steve Perry. It came out in 1995. That's the one we said was basically the movie without a movie. That book was intended to be a very neat tie-in between Episode 5 and Episode 6. You know, covers the gap between those movies, talks about all the stuff that happens. Are we expecting that someone's going to come in and rewrite Shadows of the Empire? Are we expecting that someone's going to come in and write a whole new story that takes place in that period? I really think that there should have been a cleaner cutoff, because despite the fact that many, many, many authors have handled the expanded universe, it's actually been pretty well regulated. It's been pretty good about keeping canon
organized.
Keeping stuff organized and staying in continuity. It's not been that bad.
There hasn't been one author contradicting something.
Yeah, there's
author
been
did
very,
10
very
years
few
ago.
instances of that. And
because
once again,
the people that wrote this stuff have not only a love for the films, but the EU itself.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and Lucasfilm regulated what they did, and of course they had cutoff points. They said, you prior to the films, you couldn't write anything that took place in the
prequel era.
In the prequel era,
Yeah.
You couldn't write a lot of stuff that took place in the in-between era for a while. So, between the films. So now that they're exploring those things, yeah, there's going to be some problems in some areas. But once again, I don't know that, are they going to make a lot of movies that take place during the prequel eras, like as their tie-ins? Who knows?
I like to see a Jar Jar Binks film myself.
Okay.
So.
I want to throw...
You're the one.
I want to throw this question to Andrew first, and I'll Evan to answer the same question, if you will. We know from what Jerry was talking about, the different levels of canon to the average Star Wars fan, the EU is just a mess. It's daunting to take on. All right, now that you know that everything going forward is within the canon, every book, every cartoon like Rebels, does that make you more likely to check out some of that stuff more now that you know it's official canon than you would have prior?
I probably would have said yes to this question until S.H.I.E.L.D. came out. And now, obviously, the answer to that would be no, because I thought the same thing with S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, I'm going to watch this. It's part of the universe. I have watched an episode of that. So, I'm definitely not going to read books and comics.
Not great, the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show, but it has gotten better.
I'm not saying it's even not great. I'm just saying have found the time for it. And it's just one TV show. You're talking about TV shows, books, comics. Yeah. And especially because I just don't believe it. 5 years. I give it 5 years. I'm not saying they're going to throw away an entire comic book series, but something significant is not going to be canon.
There has been very few instances of really of very bad. I can hardly think of any instances of continuity problems, and the expanded universe has been going hardcore for a number of years. If you discount the original Marvel comics, because they were doing their own thing.
That's what I was saying. Perhaps I'm jaded because of my experience with comics and specifically Marvel. Because even the Ultimate Universe, which is supposed to be a brand new self-contained universe, the Ultimates, like the first issue or two, already has, like, they're talking about the Fantastic Four who don't exist in this universe yet. So
but Star Wars has done a good job. The original Marvel comics were their own thing. I mean, you're talking the Star Wars movies weren't even all out yet, the original films.
Right.
And these comics were done, and some of them are crazy.
I mean,
but
I'd love to be wrong.
Everything else, if you're talking since Heir to the Empire in 91, the beginning of the Thrawn trilogy, things have been pretty good about preserving continuity, about being, working with one another in pretty good harmony. And, I mean, they've been running that since 91 until the most recent book that just came out.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, if things are well received, if I love episode 7, which I sure hope I do, and like a TV show like Rebels comes out and everybody loves it, and a book comes out, you know what I mean? I'll probably try to check them out, but I mean that's a lot. I mean, I love Star Wars,
and just because you say it's on the same level of canon doesn't mean that it has the same importance.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think what they're meaning is that they're looking at it very intentionally, saying, "Okay, this story is not going to cover something that the movie says." Hey, that's George Lucas kind of always said, "I can come in and tell a story that can eradicate something anybody else has done."
Right.
Yes.
So,
Sure.
Evan, all right, you've read the Thrawn trilogy. You read Heir to the Empire.
I have.
So you have dipped into the expanded universe. I know it was
Dip my toe in a little bit.
when you were younger, but now, since then, have you really read anything?
Not really.
All right, so same question I asked Andrew. Are you more likely now that you know it's all within the same canonicity to dip in?
I have a fear, not so much a fear as a weariness that I would be Star Wars out eventually. Because you think of all the comic books, the video games, the TV shows, all the movies, which, not just the episode 7, 8, 9. You're talking about, a potential Boba Fett movie, a Han Solo movie.
Kind of like you're marveled out now?
I am way marveled out. So, if it's everything like that, like it runs the risk of being... You eventually get to the point where some stuff may be watered down a little bit. Some stuff you would hit something that wouldn't be good.
Yeah,
and that's already happened. I mean, a lot of people don't read. I mean, a lot of people do, but most people don't read everything. They'll read specific characters. I mean, there were some people who read things that were prequel era. Some people read things that were Old Republic era. Some people preferred, the post-Jedi era, which actually became like a few different eras.
Is it almost a new sense of marketing pressure? Because I know how collectors and fans of properties think, and they use their hearts for the characters and stories they love to control their wallets. And is it going to be pressure for people, say, like, let's say I'm somebody who loves Star Wars, loves the films. I've kept up with the expanding universe some. But now that I know everything's canon, well, I think, oh, man, I need to read this. I need to read that. Will that be there?
One of the ways they would most likely get me to start reading these other things is if they influenced each other. However, that's also one of the things that would probably make me eventually stop, is trying to keep up with it all. And that's one of the things with the Ultimate Universe that I really like, is that, there's something that can happen in one of the Ultimate Marvel team-ups that Spider-Man references in an X-Men comic. And I really like those moments. But at the same time, when I read the Ultimate Universe, I don't just read one comic. I get them in like little spurts of across the page. Sure. And it's fun, but it definitely...
daunting. A little bit.
Daunting, and it keeps me from being completely up to date with it. So
I see it as, honestly, unofficially, they've been doing this since 1991.
Yes.
This is now making it official and saying we're really paying attention to these issues. We're not going to come back and retcon something that we've done as much, that we're really working on it.
I'm just going to enjoy asking Jerry obscure Star Wars trivia, and as soon as he starts answering, I'm just like, doesn't matter anymore. Not canon. Don't care.
Yes. All right. On that note, let's go ahead and kick off summer movie season, guys, with our review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 from director Marc Webb.
You know what it is I love about being Spider-Man? Everything. Peter Parker, Harry Osborn. It's been 10 years. What have you been up to? I do some web design. Nice arm. It's just the wrist. Just on the wrist, buddy. Peter, you're gonna want to see this. Oscorp had you under surveillance. Why? Isn't that the question of the day? Nothing is what I thought it was.
I once told you that secrets have a cost. The truth does too.
My name is Richard Parker. I have discovered what Oscorp was going to use my research for.
the future. We have plans for you, Peter Parker. You wanted to be the hero.
Need a hand?
Now you gotta pay the price.
That was from the trailer, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, that just kicked off summer movie season 2014, May 2nd. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around, and I want you guys to give me your thought on the Spider-Man character and where he falls on your superhero hierarchy. And I want you to give me your thoughts on the first Marc Webb film, The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. Let's go ahead and start with a downer. Jerry, your thoughts on the character and the first film.
Okay. I mean, I like Spider-Man. I think I've had to defend this every podcast for like the past 8 podcasts. I like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is not on my top list. He is not in my top 10. He's probably not in my top 20. I'm gonna say like probably Etrigan the Demon, the Doom Patrol, all of the new gods are probably like way higher.
Rocky
on my list
Raccoon is
than
just
Spider-Man.
Oh my God.
So I mean, I don't dislike him. I just have other characters that I find more interesting.
He doesn't like him because he's just like Batman, only he got over the death of his family member and eventually moved on.
Right. Okay, moving on.
All right, Jerry, what about the Marc Webb movie, the 2012 The Amazing
I
Spider-Man?
really just did not enjoy the first Amazing Spider-Man. Even with the mess that was Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi film, I found things that I enjoyed about it. I just didn't think Amazing Spider-Man was a fun movie. And for a lot of superhero movies, that's sort of how I judge it is. Was it fun? Was it enjoyable? And I just had a lot of problems with the first one. I just really didn't enjoy it.
All right, Andrew, your thoughts on the character in the movie, the first movie?
Number one, easily. Not many compare to Spider-Man. He's just the best overall superhero in many, many ways. The first movie... I watched it yesterday, right before.
I'm a bigger Dr. Fate fan than I am Spider-Man.
We've established that you hate Spider-Man.
Love Dr. Fate recently, thanks to Young Justice. But anyway, not as good as Spider-Man, of course. Sorry, I'm making my list in my head now.
On to your thoughts on the Marc Webb.
Rewatched it yesterday, right before I went to see the first one, and when I was over, I was like, "Well, that was a mistake. I almost don't want to see the second one. Like, I'm just Spider-Man'd out off of like one film." I haven't seen Spider-Man 3 in so long. I'm really debating though this in the same sense Jerry is that. I think I may have at least been entertained more by Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 1, the first Amazing Spider-Man 1. To me, it was just like a mess. Like, there's just points. It just didn't make sense to me what some of the characters were doing.
I mean, I thought Spider-Man just looked awful when he was fighting in the first movie. It just looked so obviously fake.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think there were some cool fight scenes.
With you on that.
I think there were some cool fight scenes. Some of the web swinging was cool, but there was just parts where it was just, I thought it was cheesy.
I didn't like the lizard.
A lot of people talk about the Gwen Stacy. I thought it was just out of nowhere. It was like Gwen Stacy's just some girl in the hallway, and she's like, "Hey, Peter Parker, we should hang out." Okay, and it's just like
how it goes.
No, but I mean, it was just like we should definitely hang out. I don't know. It was just
that was after he had stuck up for the bully that Flash.
I know, but it's like
kid that Flash was bullying.
There was also some scene where I think she was like, "We should do something sometime," and he's like, "Okay." Maybe some other time, and they both kind of. And she's like, "Oh yeah, some other time." And they both walk off awkwardly, and he goes and just skateboards and web
awkward
swings
was a good word for the first.
All right.
film.
I love those actors.
Awkward
but
and
it's just
uneven.
We could review Amazing Spider-Man 1 if y'all want.
We already have.
Evan,
have we?
No, we hadn't.
On the podcast?
We talked about it on the
pretty
Confirmed
extensively.
Crap
Pretty
podcast.
extensively.
All right, Evan.
Well, I guess I have to be the voice of dissent with regards to Amazing Spider-Man.
I just want to hear what you had to say. I just don't understand shit.
Let him talk.
In terms of Spider-Man, top 5 favorite superhero.
Good man. Good man.
Maybe top 3. Maybe best favorite Marvel. Back to the Amazing Spider-Man.
Doctor Strange higher than Spider-Man.
That's why.
Spider-Man villains ahead of Spider-Man. Yeah.
Doom Patrol.
I love the Doom
I'm glad
Patrol.
I'm here to regulate this podcast because if not, Jerry would just be bashing Spider-Man the whole time.
Man,
and Andrew,
like up here.
Andrew would be bashing the Marc Webb.
I just don't believe what he's saying. I don't believe what Jerry's saying right now. I really do not believe what he's saying.
We'll get back to
I don't
that.
believe he's
Evan,
being
thoughts
real.
on the 2012 Marc Webb Spider-Man?
Underdog, like
I love Underdog.
Guys.
high five.
Go ahead, Evan.
I enjoy Amazing Spider-Man 1. I know I'm in the minority here. that enjoyed this movie. I actually prefer Amazing Spider-Man 1 to the first Raimi Spider-Man. You go back and watch the first Raimi Spider-Mans, they're very campy. Like, those movies are very campy. These, it seems they're trying to tone down the campiness a little bit in the Webb movies. They sometimes do not succeed, but they try and tone it down a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting, if I could butt in. Like, I feel like they're trying to play up in the first one, or both of them, but the Spider-Man's jokiness, I don't think he was very comedic in the Raimi films. But at the same time, they are making the films darker. And I think that there's a lot of things in the first one I really liked. You know, I didn't think they pulled it off, my personal opinion. There's a lot of things they were doing that I enjoyed. His dad's involvement in some things. His involvement in creating the lizard in the first one was something I really enjoyed, even though it didn't resonate with me.
The campiness in the Raimi films, I thought was very intentional to capture the 60s feel of Spider-Man. The campiness in the Amazing Spider-Man was very unintentional. I'm hoping.
I
feel like with Amazing Spider-Man 1, they were just setting pieces in place with Amazing Spider-Man 1 just for something bigger down the road.
Sure.
They're just,
I agree with that.
It's kind of throwing, I wouldn't say, they're kind of sacrificing the story in Amazing Spider-Man 1 for what happens next and, third and fourth down the road. That's what that's the feel I got, and that's why I enjoyed it, With Amazing Spider-Man, with the first Raimi Spider-Man, it's like, they were just going to make one. This was before, this is before we had sequels lined up before they came out.
Right,
yes.
So we thought, these movies are kind of just one and done. There's some continuity in the characters, but, usually the movies are one and done.
Talking about back in the Raimi time.
Back in the Raimi movies. But it seems like with Amazing Spider-Man 1, they knew there was going to be a sequel. I think they even announced a sequel before the first one came out. So you knew they were building up to something better.
Yeah.
We can touch on that, what that was, but
I was going to say, I told Brad, after watching the second one, that I think I enjoyed it more having watched the first Amazing Spider-Man. Like, having some of that background. Even though in the first Amazing Spider-Man, I know we're not quite into reviewing the second one yet, but the Gwen Peter Parker relationship, I think I enjoyed it more in the second one because it was set up in the first one, even though I didn't necessarily enjoy it in the first one. I don't enjoy those setup type movies. I think that's one of my problems I had with Prometheus. Why I didn't like that is I may have very well enjoyed a Prometheus sequel. Didn't care for the first one. It just...
That's a whole nother podcast.
Have you ever seen Alien? Is the question.
All right.
I have seen Alien.
All right, let me
I saw Prometheus.
Spider-Man, for me, obviously, he's probably 1B. You go Batman 1A, Spider-Man 1B, right? Batman is barely edging out Spidey, the two characters I grew up with and have endured with me throughout my life.
Well, to me, you liking Batman more than Spider-Man makes sense. Batman lives in his parents' basement. He calls it the Bat Cave. You live in your parents' garage.
That's a carriage house. It's a carriage house.
Converted garage.
Maybe not for too much longer, guys.
You still call it the Bat Cave.
All right.
Brad Cave. Called, for the love of God, call it the Brad Cave.
Let it on your court, please.
All right, so as far as the first Amazing Spider-Man, when we went and saw it opening night. Saw fireworks after, big crowd. I went and me and Andrew and I, being the two biggest Spider-Man fans probably at that one that night with the group we were with, they all loved it. I don't know if I necessarily despised it walking out, but I definitely didn't like it. I went and saw this movie 2 more times in theaters, trying to see I saw the Amazing Spider-Man 3 times in theaters, trying to see what am I missing about a character that I love so much.
Yeah, I feel you.
And by the time I got to about the 3rd time watching, I was like, okay, I see some of what people like. I'll tell you what I love about it. Andrew Garfield was great in a suit, making those quips and things that that Tobey Maguire just wasn't all that great at. Andrew Garfield's the better Spider-Man. I still argue Tobey Maguire's the better Peter Parker, and nobody's kind of hit both out of the park yet. They nailed Gwen Stacy. Emma Stone was amazing. She was incredible in the role. She felt modern and classic all at the same time.
Her wardrobe
was great, and we say so often she's hot. Well, Emma Stone is hot, but she looked beautiful. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between looking beautiful and looking hot. So they pulled that off. The relationship was the setup of the relationship. I didn't work for me. There was a lot of awkward teen dialogue that was just kind of off-putting. But once they were together, I really felt I was convinced this is Gwen. This is Peter Parker's first true love. I love that part of it. The web swinging was great. The costume grew on me. I love the web shooters he designed instead of it being natural. What I hated about it, they didn't build the Kirk Connors Peter Parker relationship at all. There was no. They built it, but there was no emotional stakes involved with that relationship.
Which the Raimi films really were leading you to
built
think
up
this
Dylan
is going to pay
Baker
off in the fourth film.
Yep, and then I didn't like that. I didn't like. What else did I hate about this movie? Captain Stacy.
Yeah.
Captain Stacy, Dennis Leary, to me was a terrible Captain Stacy. Every time he was on the screen, I wanted to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And his death is used as a catalyst for so much of what Spider-Man becomes, not only in the comics, but in this movie. It's referenced many times, the death of Captain Stacy is. And it's just like, why should, besides the fact that he's Gwen's dad, why should I care that this jerk cop died? Like, I didn't like that. I hated the score. I thought the score was terrible, and I'm going to look up who did that score so I can give them credit for it. It was by James Horner, and thank God they brought in Hans Zimmer to fix the score in this one, because you say scores don't matter, but they do.
Yes.
A score matters greatly in a movie like this, and when we came from a definitive Danny Elfman score to that piece of crap score that they gave us in that one, it just was off-putting. It was a lot of sit-up. I wish they would have left the Parker parent stuff in the first movie, transitioning to the second movie. I'm kind of ready to move beyond it at this point. Yeah. But let's move beyond Amazing Spider-Man 1 and move on to the sequel. Andrew, since you love Spider-Man so much, initial thoughts, of course, we're in non-spoilers here.
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was really good. I think... having watched the first one, may have lowered my expectations. We did our top 10 movie list last week, Jerry and I did, and it made number 10.
It was my number 10, too.
Despite not liking I thought the first one was good, didn't care for it. Despite that, it still made my top 10. The trailers looked fun. I love Spider-Man. I was anticipating this movie. Having watched the first one over again right before watching this, and if I had watched it before I made my top 10 list again, it probably wouldn't have made my top 10. I disliked the first one more the second time I watched it, I feel like. Maybe that lowered my expectations. And, of course, I should also say I'm biased. Like, I am in no way, shape, or form unbiased. I wanted this movie to be good. I love Spider-Man. I wanted to enjoy myself. I wanted to enjoy this film. And luckily, I came away really enjoying it.
All right, from somebody who wanted to enjoy this film and liked it to a dissenting opinion, Evan, you wanted to enjoy this film as well, didn't you?
I wanted to love this film. I did.
He's got to collect his thoughts.
I liked the first one so much that I wanted to like this, even though seeing every single trailer, like I figured this movie already out in my head, like everything that was going to happen before I ever saw it. So, like I spoke earlier about how like Amazing Spider-Man 1 was kind of building to something, and I feel like it's still building. I don't like this one. It's still building to something else. Eventually, I don't know, until we see Amazing Spider-Man 3 and then realize it's still building to a Felicia Hardy movie. That's exactly our ultimate payoff is Black Cat. But
Black Cat, the film.
Let me start off by saying the things I liked about this, because this is the shorter part of the two. I think Andrew Garfield is perfect as Spider-Man. I think he knocks it out of the park way better than Tobey Maguire ever did. I think him and Tobey are about even when it comes to Peter Parker, but he is head and shoulders above Tobey Maguire in regards to being Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy is excellent. She's way better than Kirsten Dunst was as Mary Jane. I find myself more interested in Peter and Gwen's relationship than I ever did Peter and Mary Jane's relationship from the Raimi movies.
I echo that.
I like Sally Field as Aunt May. I think she did an excellent job. In this one, like this is the fifth Spider-Man movie. This is by far the most important I've ever felt Aunt May has ever been, was in this one. Those going things I didn't like. I despise Electro. I think he is.
That's shocking.
Oh Lord!
Here it comes.
I think he is the Mr. Freeze of this millennium.
I don't get
he
that.
is just so corny. He like the whole origin story. Well, I fell in a tank full of eels. Are you kidding me here? Like this is This is what Jerry's talking about, the unintentional campiness. This is it right here.
Evan, you think his lines are corny, right?
I think everything about his character is corny. I think his, like,
I just didn't
whatever kind of hairdo he has. I've never seen a person with that
I
kind
just
of
want to
hairdo.
know the one-liners. All right, he had the one where it's like, it's my birthday, I'm going to light up my candles, which in the film, in context, it was his actual birthday.
That does not excuse the...
Okay, that was one bad
It was
line.
still campy, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Cool party. It wasn't that. But what else did he have? Did he say Aeos Electro? He said that at one point.
He called himself Electro, which was a little off-putting.
I was kind of like, why?
There was also a line from Harry where Electro knocks the table to the side, and Harry says the tables have turned. Don't know whether that was supposed to be a line, and it didn't come off as a line. I didn't think so, but. I mean, I didn't feel like it was. Okay. There was too much.
And we're breaking this one down big time.
I have
this is
a
going to be a
list to cover everything.
Do you have
in like a systematic
just opening
order.
statement? Anything else you want to say, Evan? I mean, we're going to go on and on.
I feel like they're sacrificing story in this movie for universe building.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they did it in the first one, but it's understandable in the first one. You're building to something more. But in this one, like, I wanted the payoff to be here, and it just is not here. You keep waiting for that payoff to happen, and it never does. The movie just keeps dragging on and on and on. It picks up in the final act, but even then, like, everything before that is just leaving such a bad taste in my mouth.
All right, Jerry, what did you think about this film, which you were not looking forward to at all?
I was not looking forward to it. I almost walked over to go see The Quiet Ones before I walked in the theater because I thought that would be a better experience. I will say that I came out of it pretty pleased. There were some parts of this movie I really liked. I have some complaints, but I did enjoy it. I would say, I don't know if we can say where we would put it with the other Spider-Mans, but I would...
Let's save that for the end.
Okay, we'll save that for the end against the other one. So, but I mean, I did enjoy the movie. I thought to me, it fixed a lot. Well, the first one had so many problems. I thought it fixed some of the problems that I had with the first film. And as I was, telling Brad, I've got kind of a nice list here that I think covers everything, both pre-spoiler and post-spoiler time. So the first thing I did want to mention was the score. Just kind of the technical issues of the film. I thought the score was really good.
I agree.
And Brad and I were kind of commenting on this throughout the movie because when we watched the first one recently, it really was an awkward score for the film. I really thought
one of the most terrible scores I've ever heard in a film.
I mean, I agree.
I know that's a strong
score
statement.
A really good score jumps out at you, and a really bad score jumps out at you. 90% of the time, you don't pay much attention to the score. Jumped out at me in the first movie, but I thought this one was pretty good. It definitely felt like it worked.
I mean, from the opening titles on, it was strong.
Yeah. So
it isn't up there with like the Dark Knight score or anything or any of those but it's serviceable.
If the first score hadn't been terrible, I would not have even probably commented on this.
Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah. It was good. It was serviceable. Anybody else have anything else about the score?
Nope.
Okay. I want to talk about a negative for me. This is one that I really did not like.
It starred Spider-Man?
I think this movie... Shut up, Andrew. I think this movie has pacing issues. I can't say there were, like, times when I was just, like, dead bored, but it really felt that a good 15 to 20 minutes edited out of this film would have made it a much tighter, better experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge, I don't mind long movies. Don't mind long movies at all.
Yeah.
I mean, some movies can have a slower pace that works for it. This did not work for this movie. One thing I always try to do when watching most superhero movies is I try to think about it is obviously, these movies are marketed to 20 and 30-something-year-old guys like us, but they're also marketed to kids. If I was a kid watching this movie, if I was like 10, would I be entertained during this film? And I'm thinking, no. This movie had long periods where it's just, dialogue.
Well, if you were a 10-year-old kid, would you be entertained by Batman Begins?
Batman Begins had a lot of action scenes mixed in. You had constant action scenes mixed into it. Constant appearances of the character. I thought the pacing was off, regardless of the watching it through a kid's eyes, I thought a good 15, 20 minutes of editing stuff out would have really helped this movie.
Yeah, I think on that note, and I won't go into specifics until we get into spoilers, there were a couple pieces where I'm just like, why is this in the film? It doesn't. I thought by the end we'd have a payout, but there were a couple things just didn't by the end of the film make sense to me as far as why it was included.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it was necessarily overly long though. I mean, I didn't feel like I wasn't bored at any point in the movie.
Can I give my opening statement?
Go for it.
Okay. I didn't say what I went into this movie anticipating it as a Spider-Man movie as opposed to the movie it was itself, to the sequel to the Amazing Spider-Man 2, because to the first Amazing Spider-Man. I was excited because it was a Spider-Man movie, not because of what his predecessor had done.
Okay. Just
so to clear up that statement.
Okay, makes sense.
And I'd go in more curious than excited to see this movie, what it's going to be about. I've heard some people say they enjoyed it. Some people say it's this generation's Batman and Robin. And
to that comment, I just want to say real quick, people who make that comment, I'm not sure why they're making that comment when they clearly haven't seen Batman and Robin. That I don't understand. You could not like this movie, and I could understand why you do. Yeah. But to say it's the Batman and Robin, would you say that?
I would say it's the Batman Forever.
Okay, I mean, even that's better than Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I can agree with that a lot more. That it walks those lines.
I think that's just like people are just throwing it out to, it's buzzworthy. That's ridiculous.
I enjoyed this movie because of Andrew Garfield's performance as Spider-Man. Yeah. He takes this whole movie that is questionable in spots, and his time where he's in the suit. His time with Gwen as Peter Parker, I'll say Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, and building that relationship even more than they built it in the first film, it elevates what can be a big pile of mess. Just seeing it's like this is the closest we've come to really seeing how Spider-Man truly is, the character, and I love that.
He is good. He is a good Spider-Man. And I definitely agree. I'd love to talk more about. I think he brings a lot to the role. The first movie, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
That there were parts I really liked, and then there were parts I was like, I'm not sure that he's the right fit.
Yeah, I agree.
This movie, I definitely felt like he was the right fit for Spider-Man.
And I know, obviously, a lot of this is done with special effects, such as the web swinging and whatnot.
What?
But I'm talking about when he's actually in the costume. And he is in the costume at points. I know there's stunt doubles and whatnot. But his physical comedy, I talked about Sandberg on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but just the way he interacts with the criminals, moving his hands, I'm like, this is Spider-Man when he is talking to Paul Giamatti when he's in that, which was an awkward character. This Rhino was a little off-putting. But in that opening scene, I'm like, oh my God, he's really become Spider-Man now. Like, he's made this part. And I'm talking from somebody who loves me some Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. I do. I ain't gonna lie.
We've said that a couple of times. I think Tobey Maguire is a very good older Peter Parker.
Yes.
Yeah. But my favorite version of Peter Parker is a younger high school, young Peter Parker. And I think that's the one we got in this film, and I think that's why I like it more. Tobey Maguire is still good.
I can't wait to see where Garfield goes with this character.
Yeah.
Where he grows.
I agree with you because I will just say there's a big difference in him in the last part of this film from the first part of the movie.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
really do see some character growth here.
Yeah.
And I thought he nailed it.
Nailed it.
I just want to talk about Spider-Man himself for a second. I complained about this when we talked about The Amazing Spider-Man, and probably would have, I mean, if I was being honest, I probably would have said this a little bit in the Raimi films as well, but the technology was, not as sophisticated back then. Sometimes it felt to me like when Spider-Man was fighting, I felt like I was just watching a cartoon on screen. I'm trying to think how to clarify that. But when I was watching Spider-Man the Lizard, it just felt like I'm just sitting here watching computer animation against a live-action backdrop. I thought this movie, Spider-Man, looked fantastic.
That has to do with the character, though, but you're saying technology's caught up, whatever they've done
like when you
now.
Watch him swinging, you could see the costume move and fold. Things looked really good. This costume was awesome.
It is the definitive Spider-Man outfit as far as the films go.
Yeah. It looked really fantastic, and I know originally Brad and I thought it was more of a Todd McFarlane influence, but Andrew pointed out that it looks like a Ultimate Universe.
I think it's both because
Mark Baglier's Spider-Man looks a lot like just like Spider-Man. Like your default, if you asked your normal person to draw Spider-Man, what he would draw. And Mark Baglier's Spider-Man is obviously influenced by Todd McFarlane's.
Yes,
but you're seeing a lot of the connection here with the Mark Bagley version.
Yeah, well, plus the whole Ultimate Spider-Man.
And I mean, this was a great costume, and I mean the way that Andrew Garfield performed Spider-Man, the way that the computer-generated Spider-Man moved was great. I mean, I really, really, really loved. Brad mentioned the web swinging, the combat, the way he fought.
The way he moved in the air, almost simulating flying at points, whereas that first time you see him, he's just falling.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, like in combat, how he'd like grab a manhole cover with webs and swing to spin it into something, as a weapon, was just really brilliant. I really appreciate when a movie goes to really good lengths to show how different how a different character fights. I mean, I thought that was one of the strengths of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Was Captain America really had this unique fighting style that worked his shield into the combat.
Let's go through. You mentioned characters.
Yeah, I want to talk about the spider sense though.
Okay, spider sense.
Okay.
That was one of the things that was missing from the first one.
Yeah.
Which one of the things that the Raimi films did really well. They never hinted at a spider sense in the first Marc Webb film.
No, I'm pretty sure they did. I don't think it was a big part.
This movie really tried to show it though.
Yeah.
By doing like a freeze or very 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 slow motion, dead standstill, and I thought sometimes it worked and sometimes I didn't quite.
Evan, you had a thought on the spider sense as far as the distance.
It has a massive.
Oh yeah,
like a wide
that was
radius.
weird. Yeah,
like he's like miles away from Times Square, and he gets
a
spider
little,
sense goes off, and I'm like, my gosh,
that's not how spider sense works.
Now, the one point in the movie I kind of heard somebody mentioning about the spider sense, but it seemed like everybody knew something was wrong, like with the. With something's happening with Electro, and it seemed like at first I'm like,
maybe there were
that is a ways away,
there.
but it seemed like everybody was like, there's something weird because of the power, the hum or something, in the.
I don't know if I got. He was talking to Gwen Stacy.
She kept on talking.
Yeah,
she kept on talking, and
he just turned around.
I think that was him realizing and evolving as Spider-Man with his spider sense, getting that trait.
You don't know how much time's passed between the first one and the second one. He could have, more powers could have manifested themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can we talk a little bit about the different characters?
Let's go for it.
And I want to start with the one that I'm torn on, the performance I'm torn on, and that is, I believe, you pronounce it, Dane DeHaan is how you pronounce the guy from Chronicle who played Harry Osborn in this film. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was one of the weaker parts of this movie. Not necessarily his performance was weak, but maybe more the execution of Harry Osborn. And Evan, start us out. What did you think of how they handled Harry in this film?
Well, very poorly.
Was that DeHaan's fault or just?
I think it's the writing fault. I don't think it's his fault.
Okay.
I think if this guy's your best friend, why is he not mentioned? Why couldn't there be a passing reference in the first one?
Yeah.
Like just to Harry Osborn, just a passing reference, and even Gwen, like who Peter Parker is dating, apparently didn't know they were best friends. He's been best friends with this guy for 10 years, but
he's also been gone.
You think that would have come up?
You think that came up
given
in
she
a conversation?
Works for Oscorp.
She works for Oscorp. They've been dating a while. You think just a passing reference? Oh, me and Harry used to be best friends. When we were children.
Yeah.
She just seemed. I don't know.
I
think they just threw him in just to have Harry Osborn in.
Yeah, I didn't have he was almost used more as a plot device rather than a character. And that's what I didn't like about this Harry Osborn. He was kind of, I get it, pulling from the Ultimate comic books here where they were childhood friends. He goes to boarding school and he comes back, right? It's not that they have to be together the whole time. That's what happens, kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah.
He's gone for a period of time.
He is gone for a period of time.
And he comes back, which that's fine. But bring him back, and then develop his character over this film, and that makes the stakes for what happens at the end of this film, which we'll talk about in spoilers, if that would have happened later on after they had cemented their friendship a little more, it would have meant a little more.
He should have been introduced in this film early on. Like, he should have been introduced.
He comes in about 45 minutes into the film.
He should have been. I would have almost tied him into the introductory scene somehow. Maybe with like him and a young Peter Parker or something. You know, to kind of make, because I thought the scenes between Harry and Peter were pretty good. I mean, they're maybe a little awkward at times, but the thing I always remind myself is these are like kids right out of high school. You know, these aren't. I mean, even though they're played by
22, 24
people in their
people,
almost early mid-20s. These are people right out of high school. My wife and I were talking about him, and one of the things I thought was interesting about the way he presented this character was there were times when he seemed like very in control, like almost this, I don't know, like heightened maturity maybe, or at least a coldness that you craftiness or a coldness you wouldn't expect from someone that age. At the same time, there were times when he was almost pathetic. And you kind of had both of these as this child that was like raised by a system more than a family. You know, kind of the way that Norman Osborn had him raised.
What about Norman? How here is a very quintessential character to the Spider-Man mythos.
Yeah.
And all he does in this version of Spider-Man stories is die. Show up and die.
Yeah,
that's it for Norman Osborn.
Spoiler: he's very minor.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. I mean, what do you think, Andrew, as a big Spider-Man fan, somebody who's followed Green Goblin for a while, just having Norman Osborn never really do anything but die?
I think it's hard for me to go into without going into spoilers about Harry. I think it kind of set in motion things that I am okay with.
Yeah.
And I don't... There's more than one Goblin in the Spider-Man universe. Yeah. There's, obviously more than one Osborn. So I'm not the biggest... I'm not that worried about it.
Who played Norman Evan? What's his name?
Chris Cooper.
Chris Cooper. Okay.
I really feel like they just basically made Harry Norman.
Yeah, that's
pretty much.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the simplest thing to put it is they just decided to explore. Not explore. They really decided just to make Harry into Norman.
But I wouldn't be surprised knowing all this stuff. You saw in the first one. You see more of it in this one. All this Oscorp, Peter Parker's parents being involved with all this stuff. I wouldn't mind if his not Harry Norman Osborn's. If some of his past actions still influence the movies going on, even in the third one.
That he's almost more like this specter over everything versus a concrete character.
I will say that was one thing. I felt like the two Osborns in the Raimi trilogy were handled pretty well. William Dafoe was a great Norman Osborn. Yeah. And I thought Franco did a good job as Harry Osborn, even though that Goblin in Spider-Man 3 is a little questionable. I mean, his performance as Harry was...
There was 3 films of build-up towards it.
I know. And so it's hard to compare. It's like comparing apples and oranges, whereas we've had 3 films to cement that relationship here. He's just here.
I wanted to see Harry and Gwen Stacy cook and do the twist in this film, but it just didn't happen.
Let's talk about one of the things Evan hates. Electro. It's Electro. First of all, Evan makes the Batman Forever comparison, and I agree with this character. He reminded me so much of Jim Carrey's Riddler.
Yeah.
All right, but here's the difference. I feel like certain characters, comic book characters, matched with certain performers, lend themselves to those kind of chewing scenery moments. Whereas, like, the Jim Carrey's version is the Riddler, he just chewed scene after scene after scene. That's Jim Carrey could pull that off. Whereas at times, Jamie Foxx is an incredible actor, but I just felt like maybe he shouldn't try to. He didn't try to. He tried to chew the scenery. He bit off more than he could chew as far as delivering dialogue and things like that at points.
Well, I think to talk about Elektra, you really have to break him down to the Max Dillon character, who we see at the beginning of the movie, who's really this very pathetic character. I mean, he's kind of he's nerdy. He's created this like power grid that Oscorp has pretty much just taken for him, given him no credit.
He's obsessed with Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man saves his life.
Just like Jim Carrey's
and,
Riddler was obsessed.
Spider-Man is doing his typical thing about, hey, man, you're my friend, you're my eyes and ears, Just kind of, Spider-Man seems to kind of build people up, like the average citizen. And it gives them hope. And so he takes that and just, you're very apt in your comparison to Edward Nygma. But when he becomes Electro, very different. There is like this middle period where Electro could go either way. Like you could almost see him just being a not a villain, but a character who really needs help post-Eels. And I don't feel this
Post-Eels.
Post-Eels, yeah. Pre and post.
That says it all, right?
Pre and post-Eel Max Dillon. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we saw everything about Electro in the previews, and I don't feel like he's a spoiler to talk about him.
There is some stuff near the end that it's definitely I would consider spoilers.
I like the performance. I didn't think it was terrible. I did not think Jamie Foxx was terrible in this role. Is he going to be a villain we're talking about 10 years from now as far as comic book movie lore? Absolutely not.
For better or worse, either way.
Yeah, there was there was uneven, is the way I would put it. There were times I really liked him, and times I was just like, "This is just really strange."
What about the CG? How they handled him? I thought it looked decent.
I thought it was good. Yeah,
I thought it looks pretty good. I preferred it when obviously he has this ability to transform into electricity and to be very ethereal. I really liked it when he's like actually just walking around and using his powers versus like when it was so loosey-goosey and he's like, a
bolt of lightning.
Yeah, a bolt of lightning.
Pretty much.
When he's walking around and using the electric powers and snapping them at people, I thought that was actually the best part of the character.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about. I know there wasn't much to this, but I want to mention it before we get into spoilers. Paul Giamatti's Rhino.
The Rhino.
It was so just... I didn't actually mind the way the Rhino suit ended up coming out. And if you've seen the trailer, you've seen it. But he is just over the top, almost incoherent with how he plays his character. It was ridiculous and very off-putting.
I thought it was great.
He was like, I couldn't understand a word the guy said.
It was
really good.
hard to understand a little bit what he said, but I thought he was kind of a... I don't know. I kind of liked him. He didn't have a lot of screen time, and I thought it was entertaining. It was something very different.
I thought he was perfect.
Evan, what did you think about him?
I thought he was only in the movie about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
I want to wait until we go into spoilers to really talk about Rhino, because...
Moving it? Okay.
All right, so like a rhinoceros going through the jungle, we're moving forward to spoilers. So, spoilers for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 starting now, and I'm going to sit this up for a bit because we didn't really sit up the main synopsis of the movie. We know it's about Electro and all this, but basically, if you had to say what is the whole point of this movie, this is the story of the death of Gwen Stacy. To me, that is the main point of this film and how that death is going to impact the Peter Parker character and Andrew Garfield's version of Peter Parker moving forward. Because of all the stuff Spider-Man's been through in the Raimi films and all the stuff he went through in the first one, whatever, nothing has compared. This is the most, besides Uncle Ben dying, this is the most traumatic thing since he becomes Spider-Man that he goes through or will ever go through, and we've never seen it on film.
I think it really continues the first film. They're almost, even though I don't like the first one, I feel like you almost got to watch them together to really get the full experience. And it really continues maturing Peter Parker. Peter Parker is always he was always making quips and jokes, and that's just who the character is. But I think he was still young at the beginning of this film.
Yeah. It's always hard to have a movie where the sequel's like so much better than the first one, because then you're like, I want someone to watch the second one, or I want to own the second one, but when it relies on the first one, you're like, do I really want to buy it? Do I really want to recommend someone watch it so they can understand it?
To get to that, I really want to talk in depth about that, Gwen, the scene at the end of this film. But to get to that, we really had to talk about the turn that Harry Osborn made to become the Green Goblin.
Well,
in this.
and also some of the stuff that leads up to it. The first thing is this movie really deepens the conspiracy plot with Peter Parker's parents and Oscorp. We actually learn a lot more about what happened.
Finally,
about what happened to his parents, that Oscorp had them killed. The opening of the film is not something with Peter Parker. It's with his parents.
I thought that was a good opening scene. I know Evan didn't really care for that.
I felt like we should have just... It'd have been better just to have this in a passing reference and just to devote a whole 10-minute scene just to this.
Yeah.
Blow this huge chunk of your budget on this one scene. They really, you could have just told in a couple lines of dialogue. It just...
Where would you put that, though?
I mean, he could just, he finds something in his... just go to his underground lab in this abandoned subway that nobody's ever noticed until now.
That really confused me. His dad had a hidden train car lab in an abandoned subway.
His dad must have owned
What the hell was
a huge
it?
chunk of Oscorp.
That was really confusing. I don't get. But.
I mean, he could just go there and find this message from him there, and that's the end of it. You don't have to, have this scene with the plane.
Could have found a.
That was a pretty
floppy disk with his
good action scene with the plane, but then again, it was like I'd have rather seen another Spider-Man action scene.
No, I liked it. I thought it was.
I liked it, but I didn't. It's not ranking up there with
there's
the best
a lot going on
openings.
here, so you really do sort of... Some of that really does tie into the first movie. I mean, there really is a continuity there, although they retell a lot of the stuff from the first movie as well.
I almost thought watching this film, do you need to see the first one?
Well, we watch it from Richard Parker's perspective.
I mean, the film as a whole, though.
The opening.
You need to watch the first Amazing Spider-Man to enjoy
Yes, to
this
make
one.
the Gwen Stacy stuff mean all
the
that.
The Captain Stacy thing specifically, I think you get from the beginning, they're in a troubled relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you could, if you do it right, you could feel for those characters. I think you could start a movie with The Breakup is a great movie. You can say what you want about The Breakup, but you start this movie with this opening montage. You see how they meet, opening montage. You know these two people are in love, but they're going through a hard time. I feel like they could have done something similar in this movie, and we could have gotten the same effect out of the whole Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker relationship. The Captain Stacy stuff, which I thought was really important, was kind of the one thing where I was really... I guess you had to watch the first
I wasn't
film.
sure how to feel about the Captain Stacy scene. I mean, it was an interesting way to kind of give us a visual way to see Peter Parker's struggle with, being in the relationship with Gwen, because he had to promise... Well, Captain Stacy asked him to promise that he'd stay away from Gwen so that he didn't hurt her, but...
I think that this... are they going to be together kind of drama in films and TV can kind of come off childish and stuff and just not, kind of lame. I think that him promising Captain Stacy, and especially remember that he's also a teenager, you know what I mean? He promised Captain Stacy to stay away from her, but of course he's a teenager, he likes this girl. I think it actually made the drama more realistic between them. Like, why would he not want to be with Gwen Stacy rather than him just being a high school kid, or a young adult being like, oh, I can't be with my girlfriend, it's too dangerous. That doesn't come off as well without Captain Stacy, I don't feel.
Yeah. Just the way, though, that the movie used him as like this almost ghostly figure of, representing Peter's conscience.
Force ghost.
Yeah, more like his conscience, just seeing him everywhere and realizing. Right. So
sometimes I see Dennis Leary places. So
how old are these characters in this movie?
Well, they graduate high school and they're in the movie.
They're in high school?
At the beginning of the movie, they're still in high school.
Okay, they graduate high school, but yet none of them go to school. Harry talks about how after he graduated, he visited all of these places throughout the world.
I thought he was doing that during his schooling.
He said after he graduated.
So if he was in boarding school, depending on where he was at, he possibly could have got out a little earlier, too.
Nobody goes to school, though, in this movie. They just...
I don't think
Gwen Stacy is out of high school, working at, Oscorp.
I took it as that it was the summer.
The summer before they graduate, college, and this is summer before college, because she was looking at getting into Oxford.
Yeah.
She was an intern
and she wanted to go take that summer class that started.
Remember?
So,
but she's... time passes in this movie where they don't see each other.
I think a lot of time passes. How much time passes?
I assumed it was like a couple months passed.
A couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks over the summer. That's just me, how I perceive.
But then, movie time's hard to really keep track of it. Sometimes it's just difficult to do. But I felt it was the summer right after they graduated.
I want to talk about the Goblin. I just want to get there. That's what I want to talk about.
Let's get to this Goblin guy.
All right, so
what's his deal?
Basically, we figure out that Harry has some kind of genetic disease passed down from his father that he needs. And the only cure is Peter Parker's blood, right? That's the only cure. That's what he thinks.
It has something to do with the regenerative spider serum.
And that's kind of the point of the first film, why Oscorp is really trying to push the lizard trials, is to help, it's supposed to, Norman Osborn thinks he's going to save his life.
Yeah, and here he's going to use the venom from the radioactive spiders, inject himself with it, and hopefully be cured. Well, they find out, thanks to Felicia Hardy, who's also in this movie for all, as Evan says, 2 scenes. Alistair Smythe's also in there for a scene or 2. B.J. Novak plays him. But he finds out they have some of the venom stored deep below Oscorp, and he goes down there, injects himself. The glider happens to be conveniently sitting there, and he becomes the Green Goblin. 5 minutes later, he's off to kill Gwen Stacy. And I thought this is where it becomes like a bit of a... To me, the way they handled Gwen's death was executed so well as far as from a logistics standpoint and then an emotional standpoint after that I can't complain about that. I just didn't feel that who killed her mattered as much as her dying. Whereas shouldn't it matter that my best friend killed her? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, shouldn't it matter? Did anybody feel that it mattered that he was the one that
I understand that, but I think that just her death in and of itself and how close he was to saving her was important.
Yeah. But and Harry, Spider-Man shows up at Harry's apartment and says that he can't, give him his blood and all this. And obviously Harry, once he shows up at the electrical grid or whatever where Gwen and Peter have been battling Electro, he puts 2 and 2 together. What did you guys think of this Goblin compared to every other Goblin?
How is Harry, like when Harry goes to this place where Electro's at, he disarms 2 security guards. This is a guy who just graduated from boarding school and all this stuff. He disarms 2 security guards. This is their entire job. They've been trained for this.
That's when he breaks Electro out of Ravenloft.
He just disarms these 2 security guards. I'm thinking, how did he do this? Is Harry Osborn such a total,
badass?
He is,
Did he just? He grabbed the taser, right? Or did he have a taser on him and just tased him?
He grabbed one of them. He grabbed a taser from this guy.
I'm all for suspending disbelief, or suspending belief, whatever you want to say, in a superhero film. But that was pushing it a little bit.
Well, I believe that
this rich kid knows how to
in real life, security places can be surprisingly lax sometimes, and you hear about these true life
experience.
No, you hear about these true life stories of just people getting into places that the ridiculousness they shouldn't get into. But it is a little off-putting, especially because he's breaking out Electro to help him break into Oscorp.
You thought there would be more security there.
Yeah.
That, this trust fund kid could not.
What did you think of the look of the guy when he became the Goblin?
It was really odd. This was an interesting direction to go in, of making it, the Goblin part of him, the greenish, not a mask, not an armor, but a disease.
So like the ultimate.
Yeah, as I was saying, I definitely thought he was going to transform more by the end of the film to be more along the line of the ultimate.
So that's an
Goblin.
Ultimate.
Yeah,
universe
the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin actually transform. A lot of the Ultimate Universe is tied into this hunt for Super Soldier Serum.
Gotcha.
That's kind of how Spider-Man, the Goblins, the Hulk himself, and these people kind of come across. And that's kind of what this is. Green Goblin and Hobgoblin are almost kind of like Hulkish.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about... I always wondered what it would like to see that kind of epic but traumatic Gwen Stacy death scene in a Spider-Man film. I always thought about it, seeing it from the Tobey Maguire ones. We never got to see that. But here, obviously, they did it right, starting with Gwen instead of Mary Jane. And, man, did they not... All the complaints you can have about this film, and you can have a few, they knocked that out of the park. The execution, the logistics, the just going down. It didn't take place on a bridge like it did in the comics. It took place inside of a
almost,
clock tower.
I think, made it more... Because they were right before then, they are on a bridge.
Yeah.
And when they were on that bridge...
was waiting for
and
him
Goblin's
to come
coming,
swooping in.
Yeah, Brad looked at me. I'm squirming in my seat and going, oh, my... And I think they kind of toyed with us a little bit. And that's if you knew that was a thing that... I don't know. I thought maybe she could be safe after they got off the bridge. I wasn't surprised that she died, but they did put it in my head that, maybe she's not going to die. Maybe Gwen Stacy will live. So
yeah, and then just she's following Harry and him are doing battle, and as he goes to catch her, I believe, just like in the comic books, her neck snaps. But of course, that's debated throughout comics. But I mean, they did that. They handled that perfectly, and everything that came after, they handled perfectly.
With the movie, she actually, the web, as it stretches before it retracts, actually slams her against the ground.
Yeah, but you heard didn't we hear the
You hear a snap, but her whole body hits the ground. So
in what, this one?
Yeah,
her head hits the ground.
Because it snapped.
it looked like her whole body.
When I
Her whole body hit the ground.
When I
Yeah,
saw
she
it,
actually
to
bounced.
me, it looked like her head,
Well, I'm sure her
smacked.
neck would have snapped too, but it was she was going backwards, so as she hit the ground, was pulling her up, it would have been, her neck would have hit back as well, but it just slammed her straight into the ground.
Well, let's talk about what the Amazing Spider-Man 2 actually was, which is a sit-up for the Sinister Six movie.
I don't agree with that statement at all.
No,
I think there is set up for that movie.
I don't agree. I'm just saying. I'm being
The first
facetious
Amazing
a little
Spider-Man,
bit.
the first Amazing Spider-Man I felt was a setup for Amazing Spider-Man 2. There was setup for a Sinister Six movie. I don't feel like this movie was just a setup for a Sinister Six movie.
Some
people say that, but
If you removed all of the Sinister Six elements, I don't think it would have affected the plot
at all.
terribly much.
At all. I don't
Or at
think Doc Ock's arms and the Vulture's wings were more cool references.
Yeah.
If we didn't know a Sinister Six film was coming, I think it would be like, oh, that's really cool. They put those in the
Any
film.
villain could have replaced the Rhino at the end of the movie and still had the same impact.
But at the end, we see he gets visited in Ravencroft Institute. Harry Osborn does by some guy named Mr. Fierce. The gentleman who puts together, they start putting together the roster for the Sinister Six.
I guess they set it up at the end of the movie, but the whole film is not a setup.
No, it was a sit-up. Almost that could have been a post-credit scene. It really could.
It could have, except they gave an awesome
preview for
final scene with the.
Oh yeah, what a great
fight.
scene! Let's talk about that closing scene.
I think that was actually one of my favorite parts of the film. That may have knocked the movie up another notch for me, because that was a really good scene. I think everything post the death of Gwen Stacy was really good.
And that was well done when he's sitting there as time passes. And Evan was talking about time, and I was wondering how much time had passed. And they mentioned at one point Spider-Man hadn't been seen for 5 months, but it looked like a calendar year's worth of seasons.
I thought it was
passed.
a year, because you saw
snow.
Yeah,
you saw
fall.
snow,
It passed
fall.
the seasons. That's what they were going for.
So if we're assuming that she dies in
the summer,
so in July, June or July, to have some snow and then
that's possible.
Go back to
it's
the
New York.
spring again.
Give me January.
Yeah,
but it had to go back to at least spring again. We're assuming at least 8 months have passed.
I specifically said Spider-Man hasn't been seen for 5 months, which was a little.
Does
bit
it
off.
specifically say that? I don't remember. Well, then
don't it?
Then maybe he did a couple. He still could have done a couple things and then just stopped.
That's a nitpick, obviously. It could have happened at the very end of August.
But you're also assuming that the same time that he was sitting at her grave, or visiting her grave, meant that he never became Spider-Man. He could have went out half-heartedly a few times and then just
I don't
stopped
remember how people were dressed in that final scene, but
it looked
with the way weather happens, even in New York, weathers can be crazy at times. Some people without the realm of possibility that they get a November snow.
No, definitely.
You know what I mean? So, but
let's talk about that scene with the kid, though.
So there's a kid that early in the film, when they're just showing, Peter Parker or and Spider-Man going around the city, there's a young boy who, a bunch of bullies encounter him in an alley. They start to break his science project. Spider-Man rescues him, and then really just encourages the kid. And the kid builds a wind turbine, and Spider-Man's like, "You built this? This is awesome!" And he actually helps him fix it with his web shooters. And then we see the same kid later on, kind of wondering where Spider-Man's at, and the kid's watching the Rhino fight while he's dressed in a Spider-Man costume, and the kid runs out in front of the Rhino wearing his Spider-Man costume. And sort of challenges the Rhino.
It represents. It almost brings me back to something. How Batman's a symbol of
Yes.
hope. How Spider-Man has become a symbol of hope here, and that's
that
what
too.
heroes are about. And what a fitting end to that film. And let's wrap it up. I'm gonna ask your ratings, but before I do that, I just want to go around the table. Rank this as far as Spider-Man movies compared to the 3 Raimi movies. The first one, where would you rank this in your list?
Just one more thing on Rhino real quick.
Okay.
I think the scene with the kid, I would almost say that Rhino scene was ruined if it hadn't been for that. Because the Rhino scene's not long at all, and you see most of it in the trailers and TV spots.
The kid was the main point.
The kid was the point. The Rhino is not the focus of that scene.
No. And people have talked about this. Can people do a 3-villain movie correctly? But it wasn't even a 3-villain movie. You know what I mean? Like Rhino, Goblin barely showed up. But I mean, Rhino, I wouldn't even consider him one of the villains of the movie, other than the fact that he was in the movie. You know what I mean?
I hate to say it, but was Electro unnecessary in this film?
He almost was. I think the one plot with Harry losing Oscorp was pretty unnecessary as well. Like, he already had this kind of desperate element to him because he was freaking dying. Yeah. What was the point of them taking it?
Did that launch him over the edge finally to where...
I don't think they even needed that. I think, I think it's desperate enough. I don't see the point of that scene necessarily, or that whole plot element. That's something that I felt like could have kind of been removed from the film, and we wouldn't have lost anything from it.
But I almost am just not sure. The only thing that I thought about Electro, and I actually, when I say I thought about it, I actually did not think about it. My wife mentioned it. What was interesting was in the original Amazing Spider-Man, one of the whole things is Spider-Man does not stop the robber who goes on to kill Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
In this one, Spider-Man saves Max Dillon, and he goes on to become Electro. My wife was like, were they trying to say something there? That, Spider-Man, it's kind of this, you don't know what the consequences of your action could be. In the first movie, it's like, you didn't act, and then your uncle died. This one, sometimes you act and bad things happen even when you try to do the right thing.
That's a good point.
It was kind of
subtle there, but
kind of this subtle thing about, you know what, Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy dies, but you can't know the results of your actions. You can't know, if you do something good, is something bad going to come of it? So does that just keep you from doing things good because bad happens?
I'm going to ask 3 things in closing. We'll go around
3
the table.
things in closing.
All right, first thing I want to say, for what I just mentioned, where do you rank this with Spider-Man movies, Jared?
Okay. I would put it below the Sam Raimi 1 and 2. Probably a little above Spider-Man 3 and far above The Amazing Spider-Man. So I guess 3rd out of 5.
All right. Andrew, what about you? Where do you rank this?
I'd probably put it below Spider-Man 2, above the rest.
What about you, Evan?
It's the worst.
The worst? Is it worse than 3?
I think it's worse than 3.
Why?
At least with, I don't know. At least with 3, this one's unnecessary. I don't know. It's just, at least with 3, you knew that was going to be the end of it. They eventually talked about Spider-Man 4, but 3, it kind of wraps up everything in 3. This one's just building to something else. It's just like you're just passing through town without ever stopping at town in this town. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right. For me, it's my second favorite Spider-Man movie. I agree with Andrew. Besides, Spider-Man 2 is the very top notch in the pantheon of Spidey flicks. It's going to be hard to ever pass that one. It's the Dark Knight of Spider-Man movies, right? And I'll tell you one thing about the Spider-Man 2. We have we call movies epic when that's our highest rating, right?
Right.
And the thing Andrew and I would always talk about in an epic film, there's usually an epic scene you remember. Mm-hmm. And we would always use that Spider-Man 2 scene where he stops the train.
Right?
Yeah, we would say that. And to me, that is the definition of an epic scene. It's my all-time favorite movie scene, period. That train scene in Spider-Man 2. So, I mean, for me to say a second to that is a pretty good statement. All right, before we rate
that was one question. What's your second question?
All right.
You said 3.
There's 3. All right, second question. How do you feel moving forward about this franchise? Good, excited, indifferent? Tell me what you're excited for. Tell me what you're dreading. Start with you, Jared.
I'm actually a bit more excited. I really did not care. I was not looking forward to this movie at all. Like I said, it wasn't on my top 10. I honestly could not have cared less. And I'll say now I'm kind of interested. I'm interested to see what happens with at least the Sinister Six. That really interests me. I'm interested to see where they go for Spider-Man 3.
All right, Evan.
Curious. I mean, you're introducing all these characters, like you said, Felicia Harding, Sir Smythe. You know Sinister Six is coming up. You know Venom's coming up. I'm just curious to see what happens next.
Reference to Morbius in the film.
There was a lot of references.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they couldn't, why did Shailene Woodley get cut from this movie as Mary Jane when you have everybody else in there? Why can't you make a passing reference to Eddie Brock in this movie? If you've already laid the groundwork for all, these dozen characters, why can't you just, throw in two more?
Yeah.
I think their plan is Sinister Six. And it's going to be interesting because they're saying they want to do the Sinister Six as a standalone movie without Spider-Man. And I just don't see that working, right? And I can see Sinister Six as the plot of Spider-Man 3. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully we're moving on to Venom. And we're finally going to get that Venom movie we deserve. And I'll tell you this is how I feel about the franchise. And Evan and I talked on the phone after I saw it yesterday about this. As much as Andrew Garfield knocked it out of the park as Spider-Man in the suit, made the role his own, and it may be 5 years from now, I hope he sticks around long enough as Spider-Man to see him play the symbiote part. All right, because that's my favorite Spider-Man storyline is when he has the black suit, when he faces Venom, and we got so just...
You want to see him dance.
No, I don't want that. It was just such a punch in the gut. That storyline fell in with the Maguire film, especially as good as the second one had been. I can't imagine this guy's in the... I can't wait, man. I hope they do it. All right, Andrew. We're moving forward with this franchise.
I think I'm with Evan. I'm curious, because the first one I didn't care for. Did like this one. They are setting up a lot of different moving pieces. So, yeah, I'm curious as well.
All right, let's start with our ratings, and we'll start with you, Andrew. What would you give The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Oh, my goodness. I'd probably give it a grade and a half. I really, really enjoyed this film. Again, I'm biased. It's a Spider-Man film. It was the last Spider-Man stuff. I'm an Ultimate Spider-Man fan, too. And like even the portrayal of the Rhino was
the ultimate version.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The very first time Rhino shows up in the Ultimate Comics, Spider-Man doesn't even fight him. The whole point of Rhino in the Ultimate Comics, when he first shows up, is Peter Parker is trying to get out of high school so he can go fight the Rhino. And by the time he gets there, the Avengers, or the Ultimates as they're called, have already beaten the Rhino, and they're getting all the glory and credit. And Spider-Man's too late to the party. And Rhino's almost always used in the Ultimate Universe as, this is the stuff that Peter Parker is dealing with in between the big events. Yeah. And I think that was dead on. I think the Ultimate Rhino was definitely shown in this film, besides just the suit. I don't know. So I grade it in half. I really enjoyed it.
Jared?
I would give this movie a good. Good, I enjoyed it. It's definitely probably not my top 5 movies I've seen this year even so far, but I enjoyed it. I don't regret watching it. It made me excited for the next one. And I thought the good outweighed the bad.
All right, I can't wait for this one. Evan Truelove, what would you rate The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
I give it 2.5, whatever that is.
And
a half.
Solely based on Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. And Sally Field.
That's fair.
They elevated it to an 1.5 above crappy.
Lower than that.
All right. I've thought about this. I've went back and forth on it. And I'm going to say I'm going to confirm this movie at a grade and a half.
All right.
I'm going to agree with Andrew. I'm also biased. I just thought that there's problems.
Yeah.
There are problems. But I guess this is one where I'm taking my critical eyes off a little bit, which I usually try not to do. But when it's a property and a character I love so much, I was a little bit blinded by the web, so to speak. I'd say grade and a half, man. I really enjoyed it. And here's why I'll say grade and a half. Because to me, the best love story in all the comic books is Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. She's his first true love. There's something that is just so pure and just that young love that can't be replicated. And they knocked that out of the park. That not only their relationship, Then they knock out of the park. The death was handled. I mean, that was an epic scene. A tragic, epic scene, but an epic scene. That's probably the second best Spider-Man movie scene besides the train scene to me. Now, is it heroic? No, it's tragic. And then the impact showing in that brief 10 minutes and how beautifully that was shot that it had on Spider-Man and what it's going to have moving forward. They just hit it out of the park. Now, is it comparable to like Captain America, Winter Soldier, The Avengers, Spider-Man 2, The Dark Knight? Absolutely not for me. But I still say great and a half. So anybody want to say anything else before we turn the webs here? Flip the webs.
Evan and I are actually closer in agreement to each other than me and any of you guys. So that's interesting.
All right, we'll wrap up. Jerry Reed, you got something you want to say?
Well,
Jerry?
I think we have an awesome animal fact that we're due.
All right.
Rhinos go through jungles.
Now, that's actually about spiders. Little known fact, spiders are actually animals. Some people actually don't know that. So, there you go. In case you're ever wondering.
Triple A, Andrew's awesome animal facts. Only here on the Confirmed Epic podcast will you get that. All right, Jerry Reed, where can we find more of your stuff?
All of my work pops up fairly regularly on theepicreview.com. That's www.thepicreview.com.
All right, Andrew Stokes.
You can find me on Twitter at ChristJuggernaut, where I never tweet a thing. You can also find my work on... what's that website it's called?
Theepicreview.com.
That's it. thepicreview.com, where you can read my list of my top 10 2013 upcoming video games. It's a great read if you haven't read it yet.
And now we welcome back as an official contributor, Evan Truelove. Where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff fairly unregularly at theepicreview.com as well.
And you have a Twitter, right? You tweeted something in 08, I believe.
Yeah. 09, actually.
What's your Twitter, Evan?
I haven't forgot.
You find some good Star Trek tweets
True
on
Love.
there.
One True Love.
I think it's TLove919 on Twitter. All right.
From the first Star Trek movie.
Yeah, from the first Star Trek movie.
In 1980.
All right, guys. You can find me on theepicreview.com podcasting most of the time. I've been busy. I wasn't here for the top 10. We had friends in town, and we played a flag football game. It wasn't just the TN Tamara get-together, the sister convention that kept me busy. But,
Was it one of the other ones?
No, it was Boy Meets World, I think.
Next time you do any Perfect Strangers macaroni art, I'm definitely up for a Balky.
For the record, I don't do macaroni art. All right, now, been busy.
True art form.
Planning a wedding, hopefully going to get a house here soon, so I apologize for any absence from the Confirmed Epic podcast that I may miss future episodes or any lack of articles on my part. But one thing I want to be fairly committed to, is this podcast. I really enjoy doing this. A lot of fun. I appreciate you guys taking now what looks like 2 hours out of your Sunday to talk about Spider-Man. I couldn't think of a better way to spend it, though. All right. That's it for the Confirmed Epic podcast, episode 28. And until next time, we are out.